Hi everybody, Evan here. This week is all about APIs, and APIs are a huge part of being a professional developer. APIs, well, first of all, API stands for Application Programming Interface. And in a nutshell, APIs allow applications to speak with each other. That's probably not as illuminating as I think it is. But what it allows us as developers to do is to avoid having to reinvent the wheel every single time we want to do something. Okay, a very classic example is, let's say you're creating a website for a small business and they want an interactive Google map on their site with a map marker showing exactly where they are in their city. Can you do that? With an API, you absolutely can. Without an API, no. I'm just going to say no. Executive decision there. Probably not. You would have to create your own map. You would have to create your own geolocational functionality. You'd have to create your own marker. And for it to be interactive, you'd have to dig a lot deeper than that. For it to be like a draggable map or one which you can zoom in or out on. Google Maps has already done that. They have done all that work for us. They have done all the heavy lifting. So why should we have to then redo it just because we want it to be on the bottom of the site for our client that is, a local diner or an art supply store? We shouldn't. At the same time, if you're a much bigger part of a much bigger company or dealing with a much bigger client or a much bigger product, there are likely a number of different APIs which are being used. APIs, let me put it this way, APIs give your application access to a lot of functionality and, more importantly, a lot of data which it doesn't naturally have. For example, there are APIs for all of the municipal statistics about the city of San Francisco using the Google Maps API and the geolocation API connected with Google Maps and the SF data API. I could actually map out all the instances of fires in the city of San Francisco in the year 2000. Think about what it would require to do that without the help of APIs. I would need to actually know where all the fires occurred in the city of San Francisco in the year 2000, which means I'd have to collect all of that data, which in and of itself is a huge, huge job. But that data has already been collected. It exists somewhere, so I can access it using the SF Data API. And then when that data returns to my application, I can feed it into the Google Maps and geolocation APIs and make a marker for every spot in the city where there was a fire in the year 2000. And then all I need to do is display my Google map on my site. Without APIs, there is quite empirically no way that I myself would be able to do that at all. Without APIs, smartphones would not even be possible. Without APIs, the web, the internet as we know it, would be in the Stone Age compared to where it is today. APIs have opened so many doors for the development community and for the information age, doors which we frequently take for granted. But enough of my soapboxing. Let's actually try and create a Google map. Okay, now Google Maps have very well documented their API, and that is the one thing that you should look for under any circumstances when you are exploring APIs. If you need to do something on your site and you want to find an API for it, the number one thing you should look for is documentation. Documentation. Okay, in the same way that You remember Get Bootstrap? Getbootstrap.com. They have documentation. Documentation is what you want to look for. Documentation is going to make the difference between understanding how to use an API and not, frankly. Every API is going to be very, very different because they're designed and maintained by different companies. So what's going to make it accessible to you is, does it have good documentation? If you're uncomfortable reading documentation, if you haven't actually read through any of Bootstrap's documentation in the process of using it or experimenting with it, break that habit now. Okay, I am not here to read the documentation with you or for you. I'm here to tell you to look for it so that you actually read it. You're going to need to get comfortable making the determination on your own of whether or not you are prepared to use a given API. And if it is poorly documented, you probably just want to move on and find another API that does the same thing you were just looking for, which is better documented. All right, so let's get to it. Google Maps. I'm going to Google Maps API. And I don't want the Google Cloud thing. This is all about the platform. But this second link here, Overview, Maps, JavaScript API, Google Developers. That sounds about right. And look, it even has documentation in the URL. Or I could start here. Developers.google.com, Maps, documentation. Let's start there. So this gives me all the different APIs and SDKs supporting maps, which might be feel a little bit beyond me now. So I'm going to keep scrolling. All right, let's go back to this JavaScript API, the Maps JavaScript API. This is a great place to start. And this gives me a very solid overview of how the API works, what it's for, and it even gives me a whole sample block of code. Let's actually see the live example here. There it is. It's a map, and look, it's interactive. I can drag it, I can zoom in, and all of that.